Well, la-dee-da, aren't we a fancy congregation? While you're at it, don't forget to polish your frilly top hats and curl your shiny girdles. Who are you to demand proof?
Well, I guess I get to review. Hey, Cody, get this. You will not believe it. Did you know that Rigby and Reverend Putty share a voice actor? Yes, Catherine, everybody and their mother has been telling me, and most comment sections usually have at least 5 people saying it, plus you can kind of hear it.
God can't see into the future. He can see weeks into the future, bub. Do you want to turn all our water into blood? Is that what you want? Holy potatoes!
Also, Clay's BA also played the Pillsbury Doughboy guy from Big Hero 6. I'm not really a big fan of that movie, but anyhow. Hi, I'm Kitty Monk, and I'm here to talk to you about 30 Seconds Have Not Passed. You know the show by now. You know my routine. Or more specifically, Reverend Putty. Wait, no, that's not his name. His name is Reverend Rod Putty. What kind of a name is that? Like, is he gonna turn into a giant turkey titan at the end of the show? I mean, considering the reveal with Stephanie, that's 100% possible. Although, wait a minute.
I thought it was interesting about your first name. It rhymes with God.
Huh. Coincidence.
Oh, I see it more as ironic.
I'm a clergyman, lady. It's not ironic.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't think of that. Wow. Wonder if the writers were like lampshading. Now, with my moral oral videos, because 30 seconds have passed, I tend to highlight the negatives of the characters, but how it makes both them and the show stand out, and makes them better written characters as a result. Moral Oral is a very bleak show, which in part is what got it cancelled. But as Hunger Games has told us, hope is the only thing stronger than fear. And even in darkness, you can look for the light. Wait, no, that's The Last of Us. You know what I mean, okay? Like Mr. Rogers says, look for the helpers. Even if you're still a bad person, but good by comparison. With Moral Oral, that's Reverend Putty. He's the only character outside of perhaps Nurse Bendy and Oral himself who has anything resembling a positive arc. Well, he doesn't become a beacon of positivity, and he doesn't fundamentally change in a major way. I feel he arguably does change for the better. Even if, to be fair, yeah, it's kind of a mirror of Nurse Bendy's arc, but in a good way. So, let's discuss. As his name implies, Reverend Putty is the town priest of Moralton, since Moralton is a small religious community. Also, just an FYI, in case you haven't watched my previous Moral Oral videos, Reverend Putty and the whole town are Protestant, not Catholic. They make a big distinction. They don't like Catholics. And they're not part of any particular denomination. They're non-denominational, if I had to guess, but it does help for them to expand and just make fun of Christianity as a whole, to not give them one. If anything, I'll just say they're fundamentalists or moralists, because Moralton, or just funny in general, since many of those beliefs line up. Now, I believe a constant theme for Moral Oral is the discussion of authority figures, like how we view them versus how they act, and how we act, and how they deal with the reality of these positions and what got them into power, and how people view them and all that jazz, and how many of them are unfortunately bad people that we put on a pedestal, but to a kid like Oral, because you're told to listen to the adults, no questions asked, well, you're too naive to look into them until it's far too late. Like how Clay is the mayor, and he's also a father, but he's not a nice person. He only projects that image to wow voters. Like how, in the special before Oral, he only taught his son about God, or took him to church in the first place, simply because it made him look bad not to, with even Miss Censored saying that if he didn't, she would protest against him during his next election.
Well, let's hope so. You know, Puppington, we wouldn't want your next elections to be protested on moral grounds.
Or Principal Fakey. He's the principal of a school, and a teacher is held to a much higher standard than most people, especially in their personal lives. But he puts his own pleasure above himself rather than actually be with somebody who people can look up to. Like, it's to the point where he actually starts doing it on school grounds. And then he blames everybody else, but especially other women, because religious-wise, women lead you on. Yeah, maybe we should teach boys, or just people in general, not to do that. Reverend Putty is one such authority figure, but unlike Clay and Fakey, he does grow out of this, but it takes a while. At the start of the show, he's an authority figure, being the town priest and all, I just mentioned that, blah, 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 and he's probably Oral's main hero after Clay and Jesus. Since as a priest, he's the religious leader of the town, and he's the one that tells people and interprets the will of God, but he's still just as bad and as clueless and selfish as everybody else. As a priest, he's also kind of like a therapist, but his version, instead of a confessional box where he gives advice, is the repressional, where his thing is just ignore it and move on.
Oh, it's no use. I just can't.
Okay. Just say 2 it wasn't me's and 3 I blame my father. You'll be fine.
Normally, if Clay isn't the one responsible for Orel being led astray in an episode, it's probably Reverend Putty, especially in the first 2 seasons. Since typically, Putty will deliver a sermon based on the theme of the episode, Orel will hear every word and not think critically for himself or for others, and then sometimes afterwards, sometimes not, he'll go to Reverend Putty and ask about it. And if he does, well, Reverend Putty will just say whatever to get him to shut up or leave him alone, or not really care. And not realizing Orel is the type to take every word literally, because you're supposed to literally take every word of the Bible. And Orel goes and does something really bad.
Well, I guess I can forget about it if I really try.
Don't try! Please, God, don't try doing anything.
Oh, Reverend, I'm getting confused.
A good example of this is the episode The Blessed Union, which I picked because it's also the first episode to feature Stephanie, who will become very important. It's a typical Sunday, and Reverend Putty is giving his usual sermon, which is about the idea of marriage. In Christianity, regardless of which sect, and for that matter, most if not all religions, marriage is one of the most sacred things or covenants there is, since as Reverend Putty puts it, it's about 2 people coming together as a whole. With their faith, they can combine their prayers.
So I say unto you, husbands, be good to your wives. Give them what they need, and the kingdom of heaven will be at hand.
The thing is, well, Reverend Putty also has a really bad tendency to insert himself into his sermons, which, again, as a teacher, I partially get, since to some degree, it makes things more relatable. Like, I'm not just a man of God or an authority figure, I'm a man too. But he talks about his own inability to find a wife or a girlfriend, since as the town priest, everybody thinks he's taken, or he's too holy or squeaky clean to ever properly approach. Again, going back to the whole authority figure argument.
I play to feel like anyone else, but it's hard. Women like renegades. What am I gonna do? Reinvent myself? It's too late.
Which is ironic considering how certain episodes reveal certain women do think of him as a hunky beefcake, they just don't act on it, or they're married. But the thing is, rather than say a girlfriend or a marriage, Reverend Putty frames his speech as his own temporary pleasure, when ironically, you know what I just said. AKA, marriage is an eternal pleasure, or one that should last until death do you part. So instead of just saying, like, I don't know, he instead says, make a woman happy. And all Orel hears is, make a woman happy, when it comes to marriage. Orel, if you want to know the answer, the best way to do that is to treat said woman like a person. Oh my god, radical concept, I know, Christ on a stick. Just ignore what your dad says. Women like men who treat them like equals. Or women, or anything else in between. You know what I mean, okay? It's moral Orel. Orel goes around town asking, what makes a woman happy? Dude, no, don't phrase it like that. But because he's young, and he hasn't talked to Stephanie yet, I don't think, or maybe he has and he just ignores it, the adults think he's talking about stuff. When really he means marriage, he just never actually says marriage.
A little picketing in front of the holy building should cool his ardor. Thanks for testifying, Orel. You're dismissed.
But
I said you're dismissed.
Then again, the episode God's Chef was a thing, so I suppose they're all on high alert just in case he gets ideas. Eventually, he goes to Clay for advice, who tells him to...
Well, I suppose the best way to know what any woman needs is to read about what other men think women need.
what kind of men?
Men who have already been hurt and scarred.
This is so spot on, it hurts. Especially back then when every, girl-related thing was made up by men. Eventually, Orel's search leads him to a, let's call it a special shop called Buried Pleasures, which is run by a woman named Stephanie Foamwire. Stephanie is a very different kind of woman, different from most of the women, if not people, of Morrilton. She doesn't attend church, she's masculine presenting, she wears piercings, and as will be most important, she's a lesbian. As in, she doesn't like men, she only exclusively likes women.
Are you married? No. But God needs you and your husband to be one, so he'll listen to your prayers.
God? You are adorable.
However, the reason Stephanie gets away with this, I'd argue, is because she runs a marital aid store. Yes, in their religion, married couples are only supposed to do things for the purpose of making babies, but boys will be boys. And hey, what goes on in your bedroom is your own business. I think as long as it's between your spouse and you're both consenting, who gives a crap? So I assume the whole town likely turns a blind eye to what she's doing, while behind her back being like, oh, bless your heart. Oh, to my southern viewers, have you ever heard that phrase, or been told that? I've heard it's a thing, but outside of one person, all my southern friends have said they've never been told that. I probably should make a Stephanie video. I mean, I thought I wasn't going to have enough material for her, but hey, bless my heart. Orel decides the best way to make a woman happy is by getting a special piercing, and not like an earring, a Prince Albert. As in, Prince Albert is gonna finally be crowned a king, if you get my drift, with a crown of thorns. Oh my god, it's so cheesy.
You're a little too short for one of those.
Please, ma'am. It means so much.
Well, in this town, I guess I could have used someone like me when I was your height.
Ew, no, no, I should have to say no. Really? Why? I'll save it for a Stephanie video. But I will say, though, Orel handled this piercing better than me. I have my belly button pierced, my nose pierced, I had a cartilage piercing, and I have both my ears pierced. And when I got my nose pierced, I think like 2 years ago, I screamed so loud that the entire shop started laughing, which I don't hate. I hate that I didn't record it because that was legitimately funny. Orel, of course, doesn't know that when you're under 18, you kind of have to hide the fact you got pierced because that's illegal and like social services can be called, and people will get in trouble if not for that. At least in Stephanie's defense, she did assume he was an adult at first, even though, like, you should probably check for IDs, but hey. So Danielle calls Clay, and Clay goes to Orel to take him to the study, where Orel is told not to associate with Stephanie. Not because what she did was actually very horrible, but because she's different.
Son, she's only pleasant because she's different. Remember that. When you're normal like everyone else here in Morrilton, you have the luxury of not being pleasant.
Oh my goodness, how terrible. Different! And if he does want to make a woman happy, well, Clay has the right advice.
All a woman really needs to be happy is a few little hungry mouths to feed and some dirt to clean up. That's why they're smarter than us. They found out the simple way to be happy.
I like how nobody in the episode ever actually answers Orel's question in the first place. Like, they just act like when he gets older, he'll just have a wife because it's just what happens to you. Kind of like, oh yeah, you're just gonna grow a beard because when you get older, you go through puberty. They never tell him what you can do to attract a woman that would make her want to be with you or be your wife in the first place. They're just like, oh yeah, so long as you give your wife like all these things that will make her a slave, basically, she'll be happy. With Clay and Blaberta, I get it, since they pretty much got married because the town pressured them to, or at least Blaberta herself, so it is interesting, I hate to say. Just saying, he really could have used that advice to help Reverend Putty. Good veering also is interesting for me, since it's one of the few times Reverend Putty is the one to give advice to Orel at the end of the episode over Clay. Officer Papermouth comes to school to warn the kids about the dangers of Halloween. Oh god, he's one of those.
Wearing dark clothing and monster and devil masks that cover your whole face, you all run into a serious risk of becoming devil worshippers.
Like, I hate when people say this. Even in Sunday school, I literally had a teacher who was like, do not celebrate Halloween, and we all did. All Hallows Eve wasn't just from pagan holidays. If anything, it started off as a Christian holiday meant to honor the dead. The whole thing of trick-or-treating was people going out to, like, beg for treats so they could help honor the dead. All Hallows Eve is the start of the Christian season of remembering and honoring the dead, because what comes the day after Halloween? The Day of the Dead, All Souls Day, and All Saints Day. At least in England, which is where a lot of Protestant religions come from, it got eclipsed by Guy Fawkes Day. But like always, take everything I say with a grain of salt. It's just, I hate this. Like, Halloween is not a satanic holiday. It's just good fun. You're not a bad Christian if you celebrate it, guys. I don't know. I'm the type of person who gets angry when people use inverted crosses or pentagrams as unholy satanic symbols, because if you know anything about history, they're actually pretty holy. But, discussion for another time. But anyways, Orel is invited to the haunted house the church is putting on. And if you wear a costume, it's only 25 cents. He's apprehensive because it might be scary.
I don't think I should go, Tommy. It might be full of monsters and devils.
Ah, don't be such a butterhead. It's good to go and be afraid of all that junk.
Kid, how are you scared of anything? You raised the dead. Orel is not like me. Like, I'll be honest, I am terrified of haunted houses. And I know they're fake, but it's like the anticipation, like when you go on a roller coaster. Orel doesn't find it scary, and surprisingly, it's not a hell house. Like, you know those things where they're like the crisis pregnancy centers of like haunted houses? No. Orel, however, doesn't find it scary at all. Wait, did he hear the VeggieTales song? Is that why? But Orel is really upset he wasn't scared, because he thinks God and Jesus are on his side.
Gee, it's just impossible to be scared of something when your two best friends are Jesus and God. What can possibly frighten me with them on my side?
So he decides the way to be scared of God on Halloween is to sin like crazy, and then repent. You know, the whole it starts with sorry thing? And it helps that Reverend Putty was the one to say it in his sermon.
There is only one answer to this dilemma. Repent. Sin today if you must, but repent tomorrow, amen.
Hot dog!
The thing is, well, despite what Reverend Putty says, there is a whole method to repenting. Yes, you can say sorry and be forgiven, but the thing is, you actually need to be remorseful about it for people to forgive you. Like, they're not obligated to forgive you. Actually, this is a big thing in a lot of fundamentalist religions where if you say sorry, you automatically have to forgive them, no questions asked, regardless of what they did. I don't know. I found out that's a big reason a lot of, like, fundamentalist sects actually do breed a lot of abusers. But the thing is, Orel doesn't hear any of this. He just thinks, like, yay, I got an out of jail free card. So Orel goes around breaking all of the commandments, including murder.
Dad!
Orel, what have you done? You killed him.
I did? Oh, hooray!
I mean, he killed him indirectly, it counts. Clay tries to take him into the study, but when Orel makes the point about repenting, well, he decides to give him over to Reverend Putty, because Reverend Putty did start it in the first place.
I was going to repent.
Well, that's different. You should have told me that before I gave you the old...
I know. I tried, but I couldn't get a word in edgewise.
Oh, sorry.
Orel, no offense, you should say that the next time you get taken into the study. It would help you. Reverend Putty is actually pretty happy for the companionship.
Company isn't an interruption, Orel. Just an occasional reminder of my involuntary solitude.
Oh, good.
Oh, look how happy he is, but it's sad but true, that is. But I guess he's still happy in a way. Reverend Putty tells him that he shouldn't be breaking commandments willy-nilly in an effort to be scared, or to make God or Jesus scared of him. Both of those dudes are actually kind of scary when you get down to it.
But he's God, Reverend. Isn't everything he does good?
No, not by a long shot. Everything he does is right. But that's very different.
Reverend Putty, really, why can't you be the one to discipline Orel? You, like, are patient with him, you break it down correctly, you're like a nice little, like, uncle or grandpa. And now is the part of the video where I remember I'm supposed to be talking about Reverend Putty. Like I said above, Reverend Putty is a priest who, while he does believe in his faith and his God, is very disillusioned. If anything, he kind of reminds me of a mix of Father Maxie from South Park or Father Donovan from American Dad, where he does like being a priest, but he hates the restraints placed on him, so he's just as morally bankrupt as the rest of the town and using his religion to justify his own shortcomings, or breaking rules willy-nilly and just saying like, oh, it's alright, I'm a priest. One example is in the episode Love, where Bartholomew, Orel's new dog, is getting extra attention from everyone and taking it away from the adults, especially Reverend Putty, especially him.
That's my dog, Bartholomew. Isn't he cute? Thanks, Reverend.
Don't forget your inspirational photos, kids.
The irony is, the episode implies more than once that said dog is the second coming of Jesus, hence it making everything better.
That's it! Bartholomew! One of our Lord's lesser-known yet very important disciples.
And the adults, especially Reverend Putty, just don't care, or they just don't notice, or they notice and just don't care. They only notice how it affects them.
You love that dog more than Jesus.
What are my sermons to you, Orel? Chinese ear food? Hungry already?
Eventually, the adults band together and tell Orel he needs to get rid of Bartholomew, and not just like give him away or something, no. They gotta go full Bubble Buddy and stick a needle in his back. Wow, that reference is like oddly fitting. Oh my god. And as we learn at the end of the episode, nobody cared they killed a totally innocent dog, which was not sick or like biting people or anything, or the fact they scarred Orel for life, because by the tenets of their faith, which is actually a real thing a lot of Protestants believe, animals don't have souls, so they don't go to heaven or hell, and they don't live eternally, so why bother treating them like living, breathing beings?
Why didn't God give him a soul?
Because that would go against the Bible, and not even God can do that.
But
rules are rules.
But now we need to talk about another thing, his relationship with Orel. Honestly, it kind of reminds me of like young Sheldon. Like, Orel really gives me young Sheldon vibes, but if Sheldon was passionate about Christ and not about science. As the head of a church, and the church that Orel attends each Sunday, Orel looks up to Reverend Putty, which if I had to guess, I wouldn't be surprised if Orel subconsciously sees Reverend Putty as a father figure, like what he wishes he saw in Clay, a dapper, dashing, God-fearing man. Think about it. He hangs on to every word he says, and if you notice, Clay and Putty even have similar hair. In Putty's case, it is a toupee, but I'll be honest, on my first few watches, I didn't catch that. I just thought that was like his normal hair. Season 3 also had an episode where Clay grounded Orel from going to church, and Orel nearly went crazy and mad until he had a near-death experience that you don't need to go to church to be a good Christian, with the implication being that Orel obsesses over church so much because it acts as an escape from his abusive home life, because regardless of how bad things might get, you go to church once a Sunday, it's always going to be there for you. It's always going to be the exact same thing because honestly, kids thrive off of routine. They thrive off of knowing something's always gonna be there.
What are you dressed up for? Got a big date or something?
I thought maybe you'd have a change of heart.
Change of heart? Orel, change is only for hippies and underwear.
And BGW, this episode canonically took place before nature. So Orel doesn't know yet his father is truly a bad person. He's still innocent here, but subconsciously he is starting to realize it. During Orel's movie premiere, Reverend Putty is the only person in Moralton that Orel actually gives any positive attribute to, which Putty actually does seem to appreciate.
Being the most respected and righteous man in Moralton, it really is a wonderful responsibility to be so important. I am so wondrously wise and blessed.
Especially how he made the figure. Like, yeah, it's kind of weird looking, but so are the rest of them. And Orel, like, it looks nice, so I think he meant well. I think it also helps that in before Orel, Clay didn't think he was qualified enough to teach his son about religion, so he got Reverend Putty to do it, even though it was a midnight sermon, especially the idea of proof versus faith.
The congregation doesn't chime in. This isn't Soul Food Town, you know. Okay, weird name. No one questions me, no one questions God, see?
But because Orel is innocent, well, he still doesn't realize, and never actually does realize, that Reverend Putty is a flawed person. A good example of this is in the episode Elemental, where Orel starts solving so-called crimes as the detective, which considering this is Orel is very lackluster and kind of runs on insane Bible troll logic.
Billy's submission to the contest was a flower, and everyone knows that only God can make a flower.
Oh. Thank you, Orel.
This week, Reverend Putty is angrier than usual. Like, he just wants a lazy week and it shows.
Stealing is... stealing. Do I even have to waste my breath here? Newsflash, stealing is a sin, amen.
Oh my god, stealing is bad? Nobody told me. And here I thought I was celebrating the feast day of the free balloon. The mystery Orel has to solve this episode involves the missing money off the collection plate. Wait a second, collection plates are a real thing? All the churches I went to growing up had baskets, as in guys walking down the aisle with these yardstick-sized baskets to get as much as possible. Since he gives the task to Joe, and Joe doesn't want to do it, he pockets most of the money, including the money that Orel's grandpa gave him.
That's a lot of money for such a small boy.
Grandpa sent it for my birthday. Oh.
Nice foreshadowing, especially considering how Arthur was supposed to live with the Puppingtons in Season 3 in an early draft. Reverend Putty is of course angry since not only are you stealing from a church, which even I think is kind of bad, but you're stealing from him! The worst of all. And he had plans for that money.
But my whole sermon was about... Doesn't anybody listen? That's God's money. I was counting on some get lucky cash for tonight.
Oh, look at him supporting local businesses. Now obviously, Joe is the guilty party, we all know that, I even said it, but Orel is too naive to know that, he's way too trusting, and by the time he supposedly solves the mystery, Reverend Putty has basically moved on. And I think it doesn't help that Reverend Putty paid him with a nickel, aka the only money Joe left behind, and Orel still did not solve it. So he's pretty angry when Orel keeps bugging him, even if it's just Orel going to church to pray for advice on a familial matter, without even knowing that Reverend Putty is there.
Just doesn't seem right, so I thought maybe you could help me out.
Orel! Can you quit praying for 2 minutes? I can't hear myself sleep!
Funny story, that line single-handedly convinced me to review this whole show. I'm not even kidding. Or to stick it out with my binging of said show, because I had to keep rewinding said line. It's not the line itself, just how it's said. But something tells me Reverend Putty has always wanted to say that to Orel, just the inflection and the tone. Orel tells Reverend Putty about what's going on, how he hasn't really solved the case, and how his mother has a separate family who she's cooking and cleaning for. Reverend Putty is upset that Blaberta is supposedly practicing bigamy, but when Orel fails to solve the case, well, who gives a crap about his crappy home life? Everybody has one.
It's a ripoff.
Oh.
Did you solve my case? Did you get my money back? Well, you better go get it before God finds out.
But okay, something you might have realized is that, yeah, I made the point a lot, that Reverend Putty wants a wife and a family, but for one reason or another, he just can't get the wife part, because as a priest, he has to marry and then have babies. I think it's a combo of the religious role I mentioned, and the fact that he tries way too hard to the point of coming off as desperate. And honestly, he is also very picky. The thing is, he does have a willing admirer, but more on that later. We need to talk about what willed Reverend Putty's character development into existence, and it's discovered discovering he doesn't have a wife, it's discovering he's a father, as in he has a daughter. And much like Nurse Bendy, he wasn't exactly a father by choice. In Be Fruitful and Multiply, Reverend Putty has been feeling very frustrated as of late. And considering how Moral Orel had continuity, even back in season 2, I think it has to do with the episode Repression, where Principal Fakey tells Reverend Putty how regretful he is he's having an affair, despite having a wife who still loves him. Like, oh, poor him. Since, yeah, Be Fruitful and Multiplied aired earlier in the season, but Repression was produced first, so maybe they just aired it out of order. They did that with season 1. But anyways, Reverend Putty is frustrated, for lack of a better word, and the best kind of love, as we all know, is self-love.
Oh, forget it. I'm not gonna beg. Those days are over.
Even though, ironically, from his religion, that's a sin. But maybe he's like, oh, I have no other choice. It's okay for me because I don't have another choice. Just saying. This is the same town that punished Orel for exploring himself, which is perfectly natural, and told him that you can't do it because then you're wasting your seed. I mean, I don't see Reverend Putty being God's chef.
Thought there'd be more women. Plenty of sweets. I don't know how Jesus stayed so scrawny, you know?
So he's been running out of tissues and paper towels lately, and he needs to go to the store for more, where he runs into Orel.
Well, look at this. Haven't seen one of these in years. Had one just like this years ago, but it mysteriously disappeared.
Keep this in mind going forward. Afterwards, Orel goes to talk to Stephanie, who has become something of a big sister to him. And when Stephanie learns who Reverend Putty is, and that he's still kicking, she finally accepts Orel's request to go to church with him next Sunday.
Maybe next. Wait, I did? You're coming to church tomorrow?
Yep, let's see what this Reverend Putty of yours is made of.
Really, Stephanie? I mean, no offense, you're goth, I'm goth. It's pretty conformist if you ask me. What's next? Are you gonna listen to the Justin Timberlake album? You know he's an actor now. Plus, like usual, there is a chance you're gonna spontaneously burst into flames. You must really love little Gerbert here if you're willing to go to a church with all the nonconformists. Or you have an ulterior motive, 6 of 1. But I do think it's adorable how excited Orel gets.
Oh boy!
Oh boy is right.
Aww. Stephanie goes to services next Sunday in probably the only nice outfit she has, and she runs into Reverend Putty, who tries to hit on her. Ew. Not because he probably likes her or her appearance, but because she's the only woman in Moralton who's new. Fresh meat, as it were. At least that's my take on it. Like, oh, I've never seen you around here. You won't think I'm desperate. He tries hitting on her, and to his shock, Stephanie asks him out to lunch. What? Lunch? Why, that's lunch.
Now's a little soon.
Oh, I mean tomorrow. Now. What is now? Now, that's ridiculous. I don't even know what now means. Is now even a word?
Wow, hitting on a dude twice her age so quickly? This chick must have daddy issues. Even Reverend Putty is excited, and he doesn't think anything about it.
This is it.
Me the night before gone. Reverend Putty goes out to dinner and discovers that Stephanie does indeed have daddy issues, because Reverend Putty is a daddy.
What is your deal?
I'm your daughter.
Uh-huh. Okay. And I'll be a black fireman.
And she didn't want to go to dinner with him to develop a relationship or to have closure. She just wanted to go because, hey, it's only fair that he knows, especially since her birth wasn't by choice.
Please, how can I be your dad? I've never even...
Feed the fish.
With Gladys Foamwire.
The thing is, Reverend Putty is correct. He's never had a willing woman who bore him fruit. That sounds really wrong. And considering how people likely leave their babies on the steps of his church all the time, he would know if one of them was his. And as it turns out, well, yeah, Stephanie was conceived via God's reverse chef. What do you call somebody who's like that? Let's say God's waitress, okay? God's waitress, Gladys Foamwire. Remember how Reverend Putty had a heart-shaped trash can? Yeah, he also had a stalker named Gladys Foamwire. One night, Gladys grew a pair, decided to be God's waitress, snuck into his house, and stole the trash can, which was full of his genetic material. And well...
apparently there was a little life left in the old tissue basket that night.
Lousy tissue basket gets all the luck.
Okay, that's disgusting, like really disgusting. And the thing is, it's not his fault. What I find interesting, however, is yes, much like Nurse Bendy, Reverend Putty did not ask for this. He was 100% taken advantage of. But the thing is, well, you can't exactly call him a deadbeat for not knowing Stephanie's existence. Because to me, if you know you have a kid and you still choose not to provide, then you're a deadbeat. It's a little different if you don't know. Gladys kept that a secret from her daughter until her deathbed, and from Reverend Putty, and you have to wonder why. Was she ashamed? Did she regret it? Did she think nobody was ever gonna believe her? Why did she never go to Reverend Putty herself? Did she ever actually try? Was it like an open secret? I don't know, but I think it is the only flaw I really do have with Reverend Putty. Like, I wish this part was expanded on a bit more. With Joe and Nurse Bendy, I did make the point that two probably weren't written to be family originally, but the show wanted to be more of a drama, so they ended up being family, so I wouldn't be surprised if this also applied to Stephanie and Reverend Putty. With Nurse Bendy, we know she always wanted to be a mom, but she had her child at 12. It wasn't exactly by choice, and the man who took advantage of her was a respected professional. So obviously she can't be with the father, and if she tells anybody, who's gonna believe her? But with Reverend Putty, I just think, how funny would it be if we got a flashback where he's younger and he's like, oh, if only I can have a wife and a child. Reverend Putty, actually, I'm pregnant with your child. I don't like kids. I mean, we do kind of get one in close face, kind of.
What if your father's caught you doing that?
I don't have a father.
Well, look at yourself. You could definitely use one, although he'd lose his hair over a piece of work like you.
Hey, it's kind of. But yes, I want to make it clear that Reverend Putty was taken advantage of, even if not physically. Gladys stalked him. Stalking is not your fault. As somebody who has had stalkers, yes, stalking is not your fault. And did not take no for an answer. He even implied he wouldn't be interested anyways because she was such a loon.
A spinster? Yeah. Gave me the heebie-jeebies. Weird.
Gladys was my mom.
Come on, she's a religious nut, and here in Morrilton, that's saying something.
I just think Stephanie, much like Joe, is the only good thing to come out of that mess, even if, yeah, they're total polar opposites. But Reverend Putty refuses to believe it, even when proof and a red trash can are right in front of him. He goes back to the church where he finds Orel. Orel notices he's down, and Reverend Putty wonders, why is Orel so happy in spite of what's happened to him, in spite of his home life, in spite of everything? Well, why don't I let Orel say it?
Okay, well, this is pointless.
There's just so many ways not to be lonely. There are friend, family, faith. Hey, those are all F words.
So, Francine, frog food? Fun fact, I tried frog legs once when I was in Vegas. They do not taste good. But for once, Reverend Putty does allow Orel to preach to him and to say why he thinks the way he does. Why family, faith, and friendship are important. And why you should be thankful you have at least the one.
But tell me more, Orel.
Well...
Wait!
Oh, up here?
Yeah.
Golly!
So Reverend Putty decides to finally be a better person. First, in terms of faith, he decides to lead by example. In terms of friendship, well, he starts to be nicer to Orel, which I think he did pretty nicely by letting Orel preach.
A lot of the problems start when people get too greedy and want all the F words. And who ever heard of someone actually wanting to make his life miserable?
Honestly, I like to tell myself as an adult, Orel became a priest not unlike Reverend Putty, who he saw as a righteous man. And finally, in terms of family, he accepts the fact he has a daughter, and it wasn't her fault she was born. So the next best thing he can do is make up for not being there prior and finally be a dad.
Just cut the reverend stuff, huh?
Okay, what would you prefer?
How about father?
Sounds a little too Catholic, doesn't it?
You're right. Better make it dad.
Aww. What I find interesting also is, I made the point that yes, Stephanie is a lesbian, but Reverend Putty never holds that against her, even though in his faith that's one of the worst sins possible. We even got a flashback in Close Face where Stephanie and her friend tried to make Reverend Putty go berserk by just kissing, and it turns out he didn't like it back then, not because he was homophobic, but because he knew said friend did not like Stephanie back.
You can't compare you and her to Orel and his little Orelette.
Why? Because we're two girls?
Because she never cared about you.
Oh.
But yeah, this episode enables Reverend Putty's character growth, and he decides being good is worth a shot. No, he actually tries to live by example. Now he actually tries to be a better person, but he finds it's harder to do that when you're actually tested. And honestly, I do like this. He does change, but he can sometimes still be like everyone else. Like in Alone, his whole sermon, which is the framing device for the episode, is loaded with misogyny. Because honestly, it does take a long time to undo that stuff. Like, he's making progress, but baby steps. Basically, his whole thing is that women are nothing but infantilized objects who need to listen to their husbands. I just feel when it counts, Reverend Putty has become a good man. And I do think if the show continued, he would have continued going down this route. Now, remember how I said that Reverend Putty wants a wife? Or at least a family? Well, with a daughter, he's halfway there. Obviously, he can't be with Gladys, both because she's a creep and because she's dead, but the thing is, Reverend Putty has tried his luck and failed without realizing there's a more willing woman right in front of him. Presenting Florence Papermouth, one of the most tragic characters in the show. Like, I never see anybody talk about her ever. From what I heard on Reddit, a lot of people don't like her, but I actually do like her. And the thing is, I had no clue, like, her whole story was even a thing until I watched season 3. Florence's whole gimmick is that she starts off as a random background character, but she actually has her own arc that's going on in the background of the show. Florence, unlike the rest of the women in the town, is overweight and kind of feels empty inside, which she tries to fill the void of by eating at a buffet every Sunday after church, and also by gaining a crush on Reverend Putty.
I know I'm fat. I just don't want you calling me fat. It hurts my feelings.
Okay, look, I'm sorry. I'm never going to forget never to call you that. Here, I'm making a note.
You know how Stolas said, "What's between you and I? Just a comfortable lie. I'm the fool who believes when you look in my eyes." Yeah, Florence is a female version of that song. She's a good mother, but the thing is, well, she wants more, and she thinks the best way to do that is to take control of her own life, especially when other people have decided that for her. Much like Orel, she's the only person who actually does listen to Reverend Putty's sermons, and she absorbs every single word. But the problem is, she thinks the sermons are about her, when really it could just be like Reverend Putty needed something quick that day, so we just cobbled stuff together.
You know the Reverend's comment.
I don't remember a comment.
That he's more attracted to me than you.
Donnie, he never...
During the sermon, he called me pretty.
When? He didn't even look at you.
Didn't have to.
As a result, she has little to no confidence, and people take advantage of that to treat her like stairs. Stairs? They walk all over her, goddammit, do I need to explain everything beyond this being my job? Florence ends up breaking things off with her husband, Officer Papermouth, who is a good man, but a coward by her standards. She wants more. She wants Reverend Putty, and she's content to simply ruin her life at a chance at something that she knows likely won't happen. In fact, Reverend Putty forgets she even exists until she has to come out and say, like, "Dude, don't you remember me? I go to your church."
I'm Florence.
Like the flower.
Yes.
Sorry, with such a large congregation, it's kind of tough to remember everyone's,
I understand.
She does end up scoring a date with him, and the thing is, he doesn't like her back. It's all out of pity. He doesn't care about her for her. He just feels he has to because she's a member of the congregation, so you gotta be polite. And hey, sometimes even if somebody isn't your friend, you gotta act like they are. As horrible as it is to say, like, let's be perfectly honest, how many of us have done that? Come on, put them up. She never realizes the obvious signs, and it's really tragic. Even if I do think at one point, she kind of knows, like, deep down, you don't actually like me, but I've come so far. At one point, she even ends up bringing him back to her apartment after a date to, you know, like, do it, where he learns that she's roommates with Dottie Trophy Wife, who, as her name implies, is kinda hot. Not Sheila hot, but I guess hot in a way.
Yes, well, I'm just brushing my teeth. They get so dirty by doing absolutely nothing, you know, eating, talking.
Yeah, when you're right. You're right.
Oh, Reverend, no. Eventually, she gets him into her bed, and well, she learns that the only way Putty was able to get through that date was by thinking about Dottie.
Dottie! Oh, God, what have I done?
It's okay. I understand.
No, that's not what I'm talking about.
Oh no, oh no, oh no. Like, even Dottie is upset. This leads into the next episode, Sacrifice. It's Easter Sunday, and Reverend Putty has written a sermon on the idea of hope. But he notices everybody is just feeling down and hopeless, and he decides to change the sermon about hopelessness. But he decides, you know what? Hopelessness is actually pretty good, because it can lead to hope.
Nothing meant hope for everyone. So the next time you look and see nothing, have a little hope, will ya? For me.
Not gonna lie, I think that's kind of moving. I try absorbing it. Again, if you're lost in the darkness, look for the light. And what I like is how later in the episode, Reverend Putty is one of the men who is confronted by Clay, but because nobody respects him, well, Clay doesn't try to do anything more than just a quick jab or two.
You're amazing. The beer goggles you have on right now are making crucifixion look like Marilyn Monroe.
I never drink beer.
To Putty's credit, he does realize what Clay's doing, so he just decides, like, you know what, we've all had a bad Sunday, I'm just gonna sit here and have a drink, just don't bother me, Clay. He only tries to do something at the end where he's like, Clay, if you don't shut up, I'm gonna hit you, because you're really frustrating me, but...
How would your teeth like a 5-finger discount on a knuckle sandwich, Puppington?
Well.
You know what, good for him. Good for him. Still, I don't know how to end this video, and I don't want to end it on a low note, so I want to talk about one more positive attribute about Reverend Putty. He's the only adult besides Coach Stopframe to call out Clay, and this was before the whole town realized Clay was a bad person who drinks. See, in season 2, Orel didn't get the role of Jesus in a school play. Instead, he got the role of Judas, who, if you don't know, was the disciple who betrayed Jesus.
What do I think? I think if it wasn't for that pandering Judas song, this play would be totally forgettable.
Orel sang a catchy yet blasphemous song about Jesus that inspired the whole town to sing said song about hating Jesus in church.
Wow, everyone sure hates Jesus. Whoops.
Kinda reminds me about that VeggieTales song the creators had to change because it was so catchy that it got kids to sing they wouldn't go to church or school. Which I get why they had to, but come on, that's a sign you did pretty good as a writer. Reverend Putty doesn't catch on until Orel says something and brings up that doing so would make God very, very angry.
What do you mean? It's hilarious. I hate you, Jesus, you rotten little fink, your uh-oh.
Golly.
So Reverend Putty decides he's got a point. And honestly, this is not just for him, but for the whole town. They need to be more vigilant and they need to be better. And also, the adults, at least, can't keep giving Orel advice, because he's going to take it the wrong way, or at least they need to put more stock into what they tell him. Since, to be fair, all those incidents he brought up, yeah, Orel is behind all of them. Or Clay has to actually, be a father to Orel.
You're asking me to take responsibility?
I know it's a tall order.
90% of the time, I'm not even responsible for my own action.
What if you quit drinking?
Yeah, what if?
Oh, darling, the audacity! Even though, you're not gonna bring up Laverta. The thing is, well, Putty's not much better. So Orel needs some advice, I forget about what, and Clay decides, yeah, I'm just gonna ignore Orel, and then he goes to Reverend Putty, and then he just shuffles him along to the next authority figure, which I can get the idea of because nobody wants to give him advice. The thing is, the adults never inquire to him what he needs the advice about, so they can't just, deflect or something, which leads to Orel bathing in blood and ruining his bathroom.
No, it's not great!
I don't know, I guess you should go watch the show, because Orel ruined a perfectly good bathroom with child blood. I don't know. I guess, bye! Anyhow, bye.